Welcome. I'm Dr. Susan Blank. You're listening to Detailing Addiction on America's Web Radio. Today in studio, I have with me David Donaldson and Michael Daly from the Atlanta Healing Center. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Thank you.
Hi.
So glad that you are here because I think this is a topic that has a lot of interest for me, and I hope for our listeners, much as some of the other topics that we have had in the past. There's a lot of controversy about this particular product. There's a ton of lobbying going on in support of continuing this industry that we're going to learn just how much it makes in a few moments. But it's also of great concern because we've seen a number of our patients have a significant difficulty with this as either a precipitant of a relapse or as a substance that they have a lot of trouble detoxing off of. And I'm talking today about Kratom.
For me, it's a substance that really kind of came out of nowhere. And suddenly, a few years back, we began hearing about people as this is the natural way to get off of heroin. And people were talking about how it would be the safe way to do it. And it wasn't at all what we were seeing in our practice. The people that we were meeting that were dealing with Kratom were having a very, very difficult experience.
Well, and I think one of the things that when folks start using it, I believe they buy it probably in the general, like Casey's grocery stores, or not Casey's in general, but a gas station / convenience store.
You're taking this back to your Midwestern roots there.
It's inexpensive at first.
At first.
And people start to like it, and then it becomes more and more expensive, and they begin using more and more and more of it.
That's one of the ways. And the other way that we've experienced is where they've gotten it as a tea.
Right.
And it's been this relaxing thing to do in the afternoon, and they order it from these herbal Zen tea shops, and they think of it as just this comfortable, relaxing thing to do in the afternoon. Some people have their 2 martinis, and other people have some Kratom tea. But what they found was that it escalated in terms of frequency, in terms of cost, in terms of everything, just like addiction does.
And we see that over and over again. The idea to have this as a topic came out of a couple of things. The first was the CDC making an announcement mid to late April about the number of deaths that have been related to Kratom. And
the controversy that announcement has created, it is just all over the internet. When you Google this topic, that announcement has just gotten people up in arms.
So if our listeners want to go ahead and Google it themselves, let me spell this for you in case you're not familiar. Kratom is spelled Kratom. So it is a plant. So of course it is a natural botanical, and therein is the first round of defense that people have when they talk about the value of it. Interestingly, it is grown from a tree in Southeast Asia. Excuse me, I'm going to say this wrong. Metragenine is the actual name of the plant, and it is outlawed in every country where it is grown, which I think is a real important thing to note, as well as in Australia, Denmark, Finland, Israel, Lithuania, Malaysia, Myanmar, Poland, Romania, South Korea, Sweden, Thailand, and the United Kingdom. Those are the countries that currently have made it illegal to sell, illegal to possess, illegal to use. So there has been...
Still illegal to export to the United States.
Unfortunately, that is still happening. You're correct. But this announcement by the CDC that they have over a 17-month period of time, 91 people whose deaths they have directly attributed to kratom. Kratom being the cause of death. Now, there are many more cases in which kratom is present in the blood or urine of people who are deceased, but there's also other drugs, alcohol, other substances, and so it is not listed as the cause of death. But for 91 cases since 2017, this has been the cause of death.
When that is the cause of death, what, I guess, leads up to their death? Is it like an opiate overdose where they
Yes.
just stop breathing?
Yes, it's an interesting combination, and treating an overdose is very difficult because this particular drug causes sympathetic nervous system stimulation. So people's blood pressure, heart rate, body temperature may go up like an overdose from cocaine or from methamphetamine or other stimulants, but their breathing center in their brain stops working. They stop getting the message to breathe. So when you're treating an overdose or somebody you suspect overdosing on kratom, you have to treat both of these things. And it's pretty contrary, and it's not readily suspected in a number of cases. So yes, if you give them the Narcan,
Okay.
then what will happen is that that will kick the drug off of the opioid receptors, and their will to breathe comes back online, which is a good thing,
Right.
even if only for a brief period of time. But now their heart rate, blood pressure are really high, and you actually have to use blood pressure medications and sometimes benzodiazepines to treat that part of the overdose. So it is a very complicated overdose, much more complicated than a straight fentanyl or heroin overdose. And this makes it a big problem for doctors. And the CDC is pretty clear that many of these overdoses may not have been identified because this, and we'll talk about in a few moments, some of the drug testing issues related to this substance. So it's probably very underreported. It's probably used a lot more than suspected, and it may be contributing to deaths in ways that don't make sense to the doctors that are treating the patients. And sometimes interventions may not be properly introduced because you generally wouldn't want to give some of those medications to somebody who had just overdosed on an opioid only.
Well, and that's one thing that I think that we're at the Atlanta Healing Center, we're seeing people that are using kratom in addition, as an afterthought to opiates or as an afterthought to some other drug. But if a ER were presented some folks that, hadn't been there for opiate use or any kind of drug use, and then they see these kind of symptoms, they probably have no idea what the.
But and the thing that I think
What's going
about is that my experience with people who've been using this drug is that it's not been a party drug. It's been more of a by yourself, isolated, chill out kind of thing that they do. So for the most part, and including a lot of the cases the CDC reported on, these people were found by themselves days later, having died from what was later ruled an overdose. But so often in these cases, the people have already become fairly disconnected socially, and so they're in a vulnerable position in social as well as the chemical impact.
So there is a lot of difficulty with the substance. People do die from it. There's a lot of hype and myth around it. And as you're saying, David, it's not usually thought of as a party drug or let's go out and get high together drug. Often incidentally used at a gas station or a supplement shop or ordered online. And because of that, many of their family members, friends, other people may have no idea that that's what this person has been using, adding again to difficulty in diagnosing and properly treating it. One of the other things that popped up this week, in addition to the CDC report, was one of the listservs that I'm on with some doctors from the American Society of Addiction Medicine. And many of these doctors suddenly, actually yesterday, which is interesting because we had already decided on this topic, and then last evening I'm seeing this flood of emails with doctors saying they're having all of these patients coming in addicted to kratom. They're needing to use the medications that we use to treat opioid dependence. So if someone's addicted to OxyContin or heroin, we use buprenorphine, we use Suboxone to detox them and treat them, and that they are running into significant problems now getting that covered by the insurance companies. The insurance companies are refusing to pay for treatment with these medications for this very complicated detox and this highly addictive substance. And this is creating more and more difficulty, and doctors from all over the country are experiencing this problem, and we're weighing in and trying to problem solve because this is very difficult to treat. I'm not sure that our listeners may understand that, and because of that, we really wanted to highlight it today. There's a couple of things specifically about this drug. Initially, when you first take it, it acts as a stimulant. So it's often sold as an energy booster initially. So the first amounts that people take are often very low amounts, and 2 or 3 milligrams. When they take this, they find that they feel energized, so they use it in the afternoon and as a pick-me-up to try and get through the day. It takes effect in about 5 or 10 minutes because most of the time it's used either, as you said earlier, David, in a tea form or in a liquid, already in a liquid. Sometimes people do take it orally in capsules or smoke it, but most of the time it's taken as a fluid, and because of that it gets absorbed really quickly, 5 to 10 minutes. The effects last anywhere from 2 to 5 hours. And this is where we start to see the problem for many of our patients. So initially they're taking a small dose, but because it has a very rapid onset of tolerance, their body gets used to it, they have to start taking more and more. And as they move into the higher doses, what they begin to find is that it now has much more of the effects of an opiate, makes them more sedated. It's at this level that they have pain relief. It's at this level that they get the anti-anxiety feeling, and they continue to have to escalate the dose, taking it more and more frequently until they're taking this every 2 hours around the clock.
And then what seems like an inexpensive buzz, $5, suddenly becomes a $50, $70 a day requirement. Part of what's interesting for me about this chemical in the patients I've worked with is when they talk about their initial experience with it, they don't tend to use words like euphoric or high. They tend to use words like confident and productive and energetic, and these really empowering kind of pat on the back, you're really a great guy kind of words. And when they're trying to get off of it and they're struggling and going through the whole rebuilding my life afterwards, those are the areas they cannot get back. They have that real longing for that energy. They have that real longing for that sense of I'm doing a good job. And they really struggle with being able to get what that chemical was giving to them initially.
Right. Because at doses of 1 to 5 grams, 1 to 5 grams, that's what gives them that energy. But when you go above that, when you go 5 to 15 grams, then it becomes an opiate. So you've got a different effect. They can't go back to using the 1 to 5 grams. That's not,
Or else they'll go into withdrawal.
they'll go into withdrawal. And when they stop using it, they're in withdrawal as well. So they have this euphoric recall, as we talk about with a lot of drugs, that initially when I used it at these really little doses, it did give me energy. But the nature of this drug is that at higher doses, it is a sedative. So gone are there opportunities to have that ability to go back to that high energy state. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what you need to know about kratom.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
This is Dr. Susan Blank, host of Detailing Addiction on America's Web Radio. Please join us at 4 p.m. on Tuesday afternoons.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back. This is Detailing Addiction. I'm Dr. Susan Blank. You're listening to America's Web Radio. Today we're talking about kratom, what you should know. And this was stimulated from a couple of things. One, conversations via a listserv that I'm on amongst a lot of doctors treating people who are coming in with addiction to kratom. The other, the CDC report of now confirmed 91 deaths directly related to kratom. Kratom involved in many more. And this is really creating a reminder to us, since we've been dealing with this for probably 3 to 4 years.
Right.
We are seeing that more and more people, though, are learning about it. The kratom industry has been very interesting in their move to try and market this and to try and continue their very vested interest in having this available, because they are making a ton of money, and we'll go into that again in a little bit. They have such a powerful lobby that they have actually been able to convince the FDA to back off when the FDA was initially going to classify this as a Schedule 1.
Didn't for like 3 hours we have it a bill passed or
Yes.
something, and then all of a sudden they rescinded it.
They put it on
Federally
hold.
or in the state of Georgia?
Federally. Several states have been moving, and over the last legislative sessions and the year before, there have been a couple of states that have outlawed it on their own. But and we tried here in Georgia. It got very much watered down. Now you can't sell it to anybody under the age of 18.
Air
So,
quotes.
yeah. So it is on everybody's radar. The FDA, this director is saying, do not use this drug. It is dangerous. It is deadly. There are the statements from the CDC, from other organizations saying, do not use this, but we have not yet been able to get it to the point where we are outlawing it here in the United States or in the state of Georgia, unfortunately.
And part of what they were doing was trying to make it a Schedule 1, which basically means it has no medical benefit and it has a high risk of abuse.
Right.
And that's what got shut down, despite all the abuse that we didn't know is out there and all of the addiction we know that's out there. The idea that what they say is, well, if it's a Schedule 1, nobody can even do research. We can't study it. We can't find out what's really true about it. But this is not an unknown plant. They've studied this plant
For a long time.
for a long time and quite extensively.
And around the world. And there is a lot of data that it is a substance that develops tolerance very quickly. And therefore, because of its strange dose range, 1 to 5 grams, it is stimulant. 5 to 15, it is a sedative and much more like an opioid. And greater than 15 grams can make a person extremely drowsy and even lead to unconsciousness.
Well, one of the things that I'm aware of is that when we see people that come in that admit to having used it or to using it, towards the end, in a really pretty rapid downgrade, they're miserable. But then when they go through their withdrawals, they're very miserable too,
Right.
for a long time.
And there are there's a high relapse rate
Mhm.
because of the compulsion to use and because such a rapid onset of withdrawal. If you have to use it every 2 hours to keep from being in withdrawal around the clock, it means you are not sleeping, then it's going to be a very, very rough situation in terms of the prolonged withdrawal. We know the quicker in, the quicker out, the more addictive the substance, but also the more difficult the withdrawal is.
So speaking of economic impact, just for a
Yes,
minute,
please.
a study done among 163 business owners conducted by the Botanical Education Alliance in 2016.
And this is the nonprofit marketing and advocacy group for Kratom.
They estimated that the sale of Kratom exceeded 1.13 billion. And then just to emphasize the point, they compared it to other markets. And so Kratom, 1.13 billion. The sale of other online medical supplies, 1.2 billion.
Billion
So-
with a B.
Billion with a B. The sale of pet insurance, 778 million. Ice manufacturing, 761 million. Mouthwash, 1.5 billion. And soy and almond milk production, 905 million. So Kratom already is outselling pet insurance, ice manufacturing, mouthwash. Pretty amazing.
Almond milk.
Almond milk.
And almond milk, which we know is a big deal. That's a lot of money that in revenues, and you can see why this industry is working very hard and tirelessly to make sure that the FDA does not ban this substance, as many countries have, including the countries like Thailand, where it is
Grown.
grown.
And it's interesting because they try to make it sound like it's just this grassroots organization that really wants to protect their personal use, like it's a bunch of 1960s hippie people that are hanging out wanting to smoke a little bit of something. But it's not. This is big business. That's once
Right.
again just like this exact same process with marijuana, going at it to make this a populist issue rather than a health issue.
And yet, on the other hand, which I think is just so interesting, the way they want it both ways. One, they want to say, well, it helps with pain, and it helps with diarrhea, and it helps with opiate withdrawal, and it helps with sleep. So it has all these medical uses, but they don't want it to be regulated as a medicine, and they don't want to even have it regulated and
Controlled by the
controlled
DEA.
at all by the DEA, by the FDA. They don't want anybody having a say in how it is manufactured, what doses it's produced in, what forms it's in. They don't want any of that regulation, but they want to claim that it has health benefits, even though many studies show the health benefits are dubious. There are many other safer ways to manage your diarrhea or your pain, and there are many other medications and over-the-counter products that are provided that can do a better job with much less side effects and a much wider dose range that doesn't cause problems. This is a very narrow therapeutic range when we talk about a medication. That more than this is not enough, less than this is, or more than this is too much. So I did not say that right, but when we come back after this break, I will say it correctly. Thanks for listening.
Maybe.
Dr. Blank, I hope you don't mind if I take just a second out of your program and remind everybody or tell everybody that they can go to our website, americaswebradio.com, and sign up for our newsletter. And we just really started it a few minutes ago, and the response has been absolutely incredible. So go and you can subscribe. We also invite you to subscribe to our America's Web Radio YouTube channel, and that way you can go and see Dr. Blank and Michael and David and everybody else that comes into the studio, and we have the shows archived up there, and they can go and see what's going on live as Michael and Dave drink coffee and look bored. But other than that, never bored. It's always exciting here. But anyway, we would invite you to go to our website and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back with Dr. Blank and detailing addiction. You make me stutter. At least I know my last name.
But you do have a good radio voice.
Well, thank you. Okay, we'll be back right after this.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction, or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Have you ever wondered what doctors talk about amongst themselves? If you do, join us on the Doctor's Lounge and hear the doctors' conversations amongst themselves. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, every Thursday morning, 8 to 9 a.m.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back. This is Detailing Addiction. This is America's Web Radio, and I'm Dr. Susan Blank. In studio today, I have David Donaldson and Michael Daly from the Atlanta Healing Center, and we're talking about Kratom. This is a very interesting substance that's available over the counter. You can find it in convenience stores, gas stations. You can find it online, certainly, and various and sundry other places that people are able to purchase these kinds of over-the-counter remedies, shall we say. Kratom is an interesting substance. It has been around, as David, you mentioned earlier, for a long time. We've known about it. In fact, one of the interesting things is Glaxo pharmaceutical company had 2 patents on it in the past, and they let those patents go. Now, I have to think that if there was a pharmaceutical that would have been of value or useful, either monetarily or or medically, that they would have acted on that. They let those patents go. And so I think that's kind of an interesting thing. There was a letter that was written to Innovations in Clinical Neuroscience back in June of 2018 by Dr. Besta from the Carolina Health Care System in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he writes, "Dear Editor, on October 26, 2017, the opioid crisis was declared a public health emergency in the United States. Then on November 14th, 2017, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration issued a public health advisory regarding kratom-containing products and highlighted at that time 36 deaths associated with their use." Dr. Besta then goes forward to talk about a couple of case presentations, which I found pretty interesting.
I think that what strikes me is the first one was a 28-year-old who, like many of the people we've seen, went to Kratom as a effort to self-withdraw, self-taper from opiates.
Right.
And very shortly after he began using it, his wife called 911. He was having auditory hallucinations. He was hearing gunshots. He was becoming really paranoid and asking her to hide with him to remain safe from the intruders. The side effects that just were not even something that this person obviously was aware of. He thought it was just going to be a safe, easy way to withdraw. And what we see time and again is that it doesn't get people off. It just becomes the next worse issue.
Bigger problem. There was another case of a 33-year-old man with a history of heroin use who again tried to use kratom in an attempt to detox. And this is coming off the internet. There's a lot of websites. There's a lot of how-to groups, chat rooms, things where people are talking about how to come off of heroin or other opioids using kratom. So he was brought to the emergency room by his family due to a change in his behavior. He hadn't been sleeping. He believed that television was talking to him, and he needed to save the world. In both of these cases, the one that you mentioned, David, and this 33-year-old, they had to be hospitalized psychiatrically, treated with antipsychotic medications, supportive care, and some assistance by the hospital staff to try and help them sleep. Fortunately, they were able to remit in terms of their psychosis. A third case was a 42-year-old man who relocated from a different state to stay with family in an attempt to detox. And we see this happen sometimes. People go live somewhere else because their dealers there, their friends are using, where they're living is not safe. And he had a new onset grand mal seizures. So he was having full tonic-clonic seizures. They had to do a neurological workup, as they should in this case, and there was nothing other than the kratom to have caused the seizure. So these are pretty severe cases of really bad side effects that happened in the Carolinas healthcare system in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I think it's really important for people to know if they're seeing capsules that have a brown powder in it, or if they're seeing a brown powder in the form of tea, which all teas kind of look like a brown powder, so there's a problem. But if you see the name kratom on it, or I say that wrong.
It's a difficult word to use, but it's important because on a lot of the products, they don't use the word kratom.
Correct.
Because kratom's name is getting bad. They use this biological phrase. Try again. Mitragina?
Mitragynine.
Mitragynine.
Mitragynine. It is Mitragynine. And I don't know why I can't say that. But you will see it listed either as mitragynine or 7-hydroxymitragynine. The 7-hydroxy formula is felt to be much more potent and may be responsible for some of these neurological side effects, including the hallucinations and the seizures. So looking for those words on the packaging, because to your point, they're often won't say kratom on it.
And the other thing that we need to mention here is that there's been a hybrid of energy style drinks that have kratom in them, and people will get started with those, and then it just makes it more and more addictive because of the nature of the energy drink, plus the nature of the kratom.
And we have known cases
Absolutely.
specifically where that was the pathway towards relapse.
Right.
The other thing that I think is so important with this part of the discussion, that the use of this scientific name, and that people not knowing what they're getting, and I'm going blank on it, is that people who really think they're working a program but are using energy drinks because they want to work out or they're doing these other things can easily stumble into this. So how important it is to read your label for what's in there.
Right,
and
your
know this
ingredients.
term. Oh, I was going to ask you, why is 7-hydroxy, why is that a familiar term? That serotonin?
Well, it's a discriminant that we often see associated with a number of different medications. This is an active metabolite that is more active than the original.
Okay.
So it's just telling you that there's a hydroxy molecule on the seventh.
Added to it to make it much more potent in your
It's
brain.
more potent, and so that's a problem, because this does directly act on the mu opiate receptors that provide pain relief. It is a partial agonist, like we see Suboxone and other kinds of medications like Stadol that have partial activity there. So I had one of the patients explain to me that it's kind of a crappy high, he said. He said it's a crappy high because it's not like a full agonist like heroin or methadone or OxyContin. So you don't get a buzz as much with it, but it is highly addictive. And because it has such a short half-life, it leaves the receptors pretty quickly and the person is in withdrawal. So he said it's the worst of all possible worlds because I don't feel that great with it. I don't feel that much with it. But when I don't have it, I'm in horrible withdrawal and craving it.
And the worst part about it is that when a person starts to use it, that 1 to 5 grams,
Right.
it's working and everything. So anyone that has addiction knows that if you take 5 grams of something, 10 grams would probably be a lot better. So they use it at that amount, and then that's when they get addicted. But it's also when they lose their high.
with this
With this.
particular substance.
So it's just like you said, a crappy high all the way around.
Correct. But a terrible detox. And that's been one of our difficulties is that we do have to use buprenorphine products to detox folks. And they can't believe that we have to do that.
Right.
Because it is
Natural.
and a crappy high. So they can't believe that it's that potent that they would have to have medication to help them come off of it. And the cravings are so bad that they have a hard time staying away from it. It is a paradox.
And typically you end up having to treat the opiate withdrawal as well as anxiety.
Correct.
And what we've experienced is that drive to try and manipulate and med seek becomes really high in both those areas.
Right.
And we have to have really strict behavioral and medication contracts with these patients before they start really trying to escalate both of these other medications.
And it's really tough. And some of them go back out. They can't.
Right.
They can't make the commitments. Not that they don't want to. It's that physiologically, this is such a terrible double bind for them. The cravings are so bad, and the desire to keep using it, and the ready availability
Exactly.
of it makes it a real problem for many of our patients.
I mean, if every time you go get gas and it's there staring at you on the counter, just right there as an impulse buy, a lot of people just can't. They can get time away from it, but then it just calls them back.
Very easily, very quickly. Many people think, well, it's a natural substance. It's got to be really good. We know that lots of natural substances are really very bad and very, very deadly. And that argument falls on deaf ears, but it's a highly valued marketing strategy for a lot of these manufacturers.
It's funny because it's one that's always used first when they use it first with marijuana, and you come out and they'll talk about how vodka comes from potatoes and
right, and
all of these
nicotine
other-
comes from tobacco plants.
And if you just use it, with moderation. But in one of the articles that we were looking at today, it was really interesting that the person was saying there are a lot of natural products that do, at a very specific dose, wonderful things, but at a slightly dose higher or slightly dose lower are deadly.
Right.
And I think that's part of what keeps getting missed with this in particular, that no one knows what the right dose is for this substance.
Correct.
Or if there is.
If there is.
So there's a beautiful plant called the periwinkle plant. It's a lovely blue color. And from that comes vincristin and vinblastin, which are extremely potent cancer treating agents, that the goal is to try and give high enough doses to kill the cancer without killing the patient from this beautiful natural periwinkle plant. There certainly the belladonna, the deadly nightshade group,
helps people relax
and have really big eyes, and killed Romeo and Juliet. On that note, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about what you need to know about kratom. Thanks for listening.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
This is Dr. Susan Blank, host of Detailing Addiction and medical director of the Atlanta Healing Center. Please join me on Tuesday afternoons at 4 p.m.
The disease of addiction is a life-altering challenge, not just for the person suffering its effects, but also for the family and friends who support and love the one caught in its grasp. What should be the course of treatment? Who is the best person to render treatment? And what is the best place to go for the care that is needed? We know that you want answers to these and many more questions. Call 770-696-9862 and speak to a representative of the Atlanta Healing Center. They can tailor a program specifically designed to address the needs of the person suffering with an addiction or give you guidance as to where that help may be found. Information is the key, and the trained staff at AHC is here to assist. If you wish, you can also get more information on the website located at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back. This is Detailing Addiction. I'm Dr. Susan Blank. This is America's Web Radio, and in studio today I have Michael Daly and David Donaldson from the Atlanta Healing Center. I do want to give some credit to Dr. Jeffrey Fuden, who writes a wonderful column called Opioids and Politics, and some of his interesting answers to questions that have been posed to him, I think, are have been really helpful for a lot of people, and certainly informed some of our discussion today. So I did want to give him some credit for that. And one of the arguments is that kratom can't be an opioid because it doesn't show up positive on a drug screen for opioids. And Dr. Funden says, this is one of my favorite questions. It all has to do with chemistry, is his answer. Interestingly, when you get an opiate, ATE, opiate drug screen, you're really only looking at morphine and codeine. The synthetics and the semi-synthetic opioids have to have individual specialized urine drug testing. More and more places, including a lot of workplace drug testing programs, do add things like hydrocodone and oxycodone to their testing. But medications like fentanyl and Dilaudid, Demerol, some of these, certainly Suboxone and Methadone, have to have a specific test to identify them. If they're at really high levels in the person's system, we may see a positive opioid. It may show up positive for the category in general, but then unless that drug test is specific for it, it's not going to show up.
Right.
And one of the interesting things is that kratom has to have a specific drug testing. So back when we were talking about that, there have probably been a number of deaths that have been missed because there was not specialized drug testing done. I learned something new in this process, and that is that we've seen on some of our patients positive fentanyl screens, but when they go to confirm for fentanyl and norfentanyl, they're negative. And in our research for the show today, found out that that may in fact be a false positive for fentanyl, but actually a false negative for kratom, and that we should be adding kratom for those particular individuals. We do have some of our folks tested routinely for kratom. Others we've just added to the list today after my research. You learn something new every day.
Part of what struck me is so interesting with that is that typically our young male addicts are just little pharmacists in of themselves.
Right.
And so often, if we have a drug screen that is positive at the parent level but ends up not confirming, their question is always, did it confirm? What did it confirm? So they have known this. They're always a step or two ahead of us. And clearly on some of those, if we go back and if we had the capacity to go back and run those, they would be this and that. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure. And they're just trying to see, as they always do, what they can get away with, what we won't figure out with them. And we need to work a little bit harder on their treatment plan to help them get more of the spirit of recovery.
Right.
Part of what I've been thinking about quite a bit through the show today is this is detailing addictions. And most all of our clients are people dealing with the disease of chemical dependency. And part of what that means is that their drive center has been hijacked by whatever their drug of choice is, whether it's benzodiazepines and something that helps them relax, or whether it's an amphetamine that helps them get pumped up. And they're in there working on healing their brain. And we caution them all the time about all the various substances out there that they need to be cautious of. But this in particular, regardless of what their drug of choice is, this substance is going to trigger their drug of choice. So it's going to trigger that kind of relapse as well as its own addiction.
Right. Which is ironic. We have a couple of substances that are like that are the chameleons, as we call them, that whether you like uppers or downers, you will like these particular substances, and they're alcohol, they're tobacco, marijuana, and heroin. Now we need to add kratom, because though the action of kratom is a bit different in terms of where it's releasing dopamine, the fact is that it can either be a stimulant or a sedative, depending on how you like it and how you dose it.
And tends to start out as a stimulant
Right.
and becomes a sedative. So it's getting them from both directions.
Very, very dangerous, and something that I hope all of our listeners are going to be much more cautious about, much more suspicious of. If suddenly your loved one is drinking tea, lots and lots of tea, if suddenly your loved one is having a lot of little pills or a little brown powder, you may want to do a little more investigating, because unfortunately there's a lot of myths out on the internet, and a lot of our patients, well-meaning or trying to find a way to get a high that they won't get caught, or just inadvertently not really understanding this particular drug at all, they'll fall into it. And we've seen relapses when people have been sober for a good long time. We've seen people try and use it as a detox. We've seen people it becomes their initial drug of choice. So we see it across all spectrum of folks with the disease of addiction, and it's a disaster for every one of them.
We've had a few patients where the pathway has been their health food store, where they have gone on these, they've talked about going on these healthy diets and these taking supplements, and we always want them to share everything that they're ingesting with us, so we know what's going on, the information, not the product.
Right. Thank you for clarifying.
But one of them actually came to us and said, "What is kratom? The place where I get my health food products says it right on the door. Kratom sold here." And for her, the word itself was an amazing trigger. But I know there's a lot of other people who are going into that place with legitimate health concern reasons and ending up in a real dangerous predicament.
So it's touted as a pain reliever, as a mood stabilizer, as an antidepressant, as an energy booster, as a way to solve the opioid epidemic. It's marketed in many different ways under many different names. And the access to this has been pretty much everywhere. We see it in liquids. We see it in little powders. We see it in little pill form or a
Capsules.
a capsule, and you'll see the brown powder in it. Via Zen is one of the companies that had a significant amount of kratom in it. They have allegedly pulled the kratom out of that particular substance after the FDA had some words with them. But it's like whack-a-mole. One goes off, another one comes on, and not always is it listed as kratom.
Well, what's so interesting is the way they market all of these packagings
Mm-hmm.
is they hit every market group. So you have Aviva Zen, and then you have Captain Kratom Gold XL, and you have Kratom OPMs. But all the packaging is designed to lure a certain personality type.
Right. The Viva Zen looks exactly like 5 Hour Energy.
Yes.
It's in a little bottle, little container, so hence it's already playing on some of the other successful products, which is going to be another show for another day. Some of the difficulties that are happening with these high caffeinated or highly intense stimulant energy boosters that also are causing deaths. But to your point, Michael, yes, they appeal to kids, they appeal to women, they appeal to young, they appeal to older, they appeal to those people looking for the energy boost, or those people looking to be calm and mellow and treat their depression.
Mm-hmm.
So
And help their mood while they're on a diet.
it's amazing. And lots and lots of misinformation on the internet, and lots of purposeful misinformation, unfortunately, from the marketing companies. We're very hopeful that the FDA will take the CDC's findings more seriously and will take some action moving towards making this substance illegal. For now, just buyer beware, families beware. We'll see you next week on Detailing Addiction.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier